I am so glad to have this radio platform where I get an opportunity to chat with some of my favorite people. One of those being Harry Siemens. Harry, thank you so much for joining me in the studio today.
It's an absolute privilege. I love radio. I've been in radio. It started way back when, 1971, and I've been able to, I did exactly what you did for at least 10 years, and at the same time, I've been on and off of radio, but from the other side.
Yes.
And I also did some television, and so I love getting on and doing. But the key thing in the work that I do, number one, I've always been an advocate for the farmer.
Yes.
That's number one. Number two, to be an accurate journalist. And to be fair and objective. When I do a column, people say, well, yeah, when you do a column, you can do an opinion. But and thirdly, my service, as you know, is to the Lord Almighty, and He's dedicate everything to Him, and He keeps giving me life.
That's fantastic. And I mean, we know and we've discussed how your rewards come in heaven, but you are being rewarded on earth for a very special a reward, and that is the King Charles III Coronation Medal. Harry, when did you find out that you were nominated?
Back in the beginning of January, I got this letter from Senator Don Plett's office, and directly from him saying I was given this award for all the work that I did, but it didn't say anything else. It just says for your dedication and service and the work that you did. And Don and I have known each other for quite some years, right? And so I looked at it initially, and then I made a call. Oh, no, to his office, and then I see Rosemary Siemens, who happens to be my niece, gets the same award a few weeks back in Vancouver. And so, you know what? It's a real honor to get an award like that, but I've never been one that's really been self-promoting in a sense. I just let it kind of happen, and I'm ready to do what I need to do. But at the same time, it's an absolute honor to get that award, and I say thank you to Senator Don Plett and his office for making this available and to continue to tell people what I love to do, and that's to serve farmers.
Decades of experience in broadcasting, journalism, and so much more. And you got your start at Golden West. Can you take us back?
Totally. I got my start. I had gone back to school to get my education, but I was farming with my father. My father in 1960 farmed 1,000 acres. My brother Jack, who's still farming, he was already farming at that time. And so I come home from university in 1971, and my dad says, and I had promised him in 1967 I would farm forever because we'd bought a neighbor's quarter section. And so he says to me, he says, Harry, there's an advertisement in the Red River Valley Echo at the time. They're looking for a farm broadcaster at Radio Southern Manitoba.
Right.
And I said, what? It never, as I mentioned, it never was on my radar screen to ever do that kind of thing, because when I first when I first dropped out of school in grade 11, my English mark was 25%.
Right. You kind of need that for broadcasting.
So anyway, and so I got involved, and he says, why don't you apply? Well, I did. A month later, Jim McSweeney calls me, and he says, you got the job, but you're going to start evenings. And so I did, from April 1971 through February 1972. I'm at home sleeping because I was doing evenings, right?
Right.
And he calls me. He says, Harry, you don't have to come in tonight. I said, why? Well, he says, tomorrow you're the real farm broadcaster. And so first of all, I said, when do I start? He says, tomorrow. I said, what time? Well, maybe you should be here at 3:30 in the morning. It's a little new for you. And for the next 10 years, I did the Farmer's Almanac, which was, I came in, signed the station on at 5:15, put on whatever we needed to put on. And then at 6 o'clock, I went live.
Wow.
I did 6 to 7, or 6 to quarter to 7. I went live. And I did that for 10 years, and I would work some weekends. I read funeral announcements. and you know what? Jim McSweeney, initially, I wasn't doing a good job broadcasting.
Okay.
And he says, maybe it's not something you may want to do. I says, Jim, you got me here. Now you get me through. Well, I lived at Plum Coulee. And he says, well, you come in for the next 2 weeks. Every morning, I'll train you. And he did.
Wow.
And here I am today, and I stayed on. I became, the farm broadcaster, and I gave Jim the temperatures, from the newsroom,
Right.
rip and read from Canadian Press, and would give him stuff all the way from till he started at 7 after I finished, and then till he was done, I think at 10 o'clock or something. I mean, I even worked with Aunt Ollie,
Oh, Aunt Ollie, what a famous figure in Golden West history, and so well loved and a part of people's homes.
Well, yeah, I listened to her stuff when I was a kid.
We can only hope as broadcasters that we are that important
Totally.
to somebody.
You're not kidding.
Well, we all start a little green, and then we develop our skills over the years through people that inspire and take the time to train us. Harry, I wish we could go through every decade of your career because you've done amazing things. But, of course, we only have a few minutes of time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about now. You are still working, and you're still writing, and you're still broadcasting.
I have continued, I started with the Prairie Hog Country, I think it's 29 years ago. It's a magazine that goes to all hog producers across Western Canada, some into the States. So I write for that, whenever they publish, every 2 months, I believe. And then the Agri Post, which I helped start in 2021, I write for it. And then the Ontario Farmer. What I write here, I send to the Ontario Farmer. It's a bit like a crapshoot, but they pay twice as much.
Oh, perfect.
And it's been awesome. I've been with them probably 25, 30 years where I've been sending materials. And then I do, on another radio station, CJOB, every Sunday morning.
Yeah.
I talk about farming from 7:05 till 7:15.
And you go live.
To go live right from my telephone at home.
That is amazing.
And, and just one other thing, during that career, and I did a television show called the Manitoba Farm Report, and that's where I coined the editorial Siemens Says. And I did that, from 1991 through 1998, and that was MTN.
Yep.
And so anyway, I did that television show. It was a half-hour weekly show.
My sister and I watch the Manitoba Farm Report every week.
And it was such a privilege to do it, and so I did that, and then that came to a sudden end, and they thought I was too old,
Oh, back then?
And so I had asked Les Kletke, how do I write for all those papers? Because he became an ag rep. He couldn't anymore, or at least not get paid for it. And so I sent something to Don Radford, who was the editor here at the Pembina Times.
Okay, yes.
And he says, if you can get it by Don, you can get it by anybody. Well, after 6 months, after sending him stuff all the time, I says, what can I do different? He says, nothing. He says, you're writing the way you talk, and people love it. He gets a call from the dairy farmers, the Western Dairy Farmer, which was then owned by Ontario Farmer. They needed a Manitoba correspondent, and Don tells him, there's only one guy I can recommend, and that's Harry. And I started writing, and that's, and the rest they say is history. So I continue to write, 20, 25 stories every single month, and I love it. If it wasn't for technology, I had my first computer in 1982, and so if I embraced technology, and so whenever something came along that I thought could do it even better, not just for the sake of getting something new, it had to be better. I would get it, and today that's I have things apps that I use that I would not be in the business if I hadn't been able to adapt.